everybody, and welcome to Geek Chats. I am your host, Jon Del Arroz. I am the author of Star Realms Rescue Run, which is available now on Amazon. It's a novelization of the Star Realms card game, which many of you will be familiar with. And today I have a game designer of a card game which is near and dear to my heart, Android Netrunner. His name is Damon Stone. Damon, say hi.
Hello, everyone.
I wanted to talk about theme in gaming and with the LCGs in general, which I think actually this stems back to L5R and Magic and the original Netrunner too. That theme really came into the scene with CCGs, LCGs a lot more than typical board games, and board games are following suit now. But you really have a lot more room to explore. What did you start to think about that when you started working on this game?
Well, I always thought back to the games that I really enjoyed playing myself before I had become a designer. And there were types of games like, chess or poker that were pretty straightforward. There's no theme to poker. It's just, get the suit of cards. Chess has the loose idea of like, you are an army, kings, queens, entire kingdom, and you are battling against someone else. But again, it is not one that the vast majority of people even stop to think about, and it has almost no impact in the actual mechanics of the game. It is completely, separate, disposable. You could have the pieces shaped as anything. As anybody who's played any of the various themed forms of chess have seen, they have Starfleet chess where it's a bunch of like Klingon vessels or Romulan vessels or
I had that
vessels, right? I know, it's great, which is awesome if you like chess and happen to also be, a Star Trek fan. But there's nothing about the game that is at all different or anything that of Star Trek that actually carries across in the game play. And then you have things like Arkham Horror, which was one of my first real loves as a board game. And it's dripping with theme. The entire idea of being an investigator and roaming around Arkham, trying to close down these portals and dispose of these monsters before, a great old one awoke, was very evocative. And much closer to the role-playing games that were so near and dear to my heart as a child. So when it got to the point where Magic was suddenly a thing, I definitely saw them creating a world that sort of was the underpinnings of the cards that you were actually seeing. There was a card that was called, a Sarah Angel, and there was a little bit of flavor text, and then there's like the Urza's Mine and a Sengir Vampire, and as you played Magic over the years, you start to get a feel for what, this world, which then became much more obvious as a series of planes, was. And you're right. I think a lot of more traditional board games started becoming more and more thematic, and not just in we'll give this a neat little thing that is currently popular, but we'll actually create a game where the theme impacts the mechanics, and the mechanics will and so that's always been a huge draw for me.
Me too. In almost every game I play, and I think that stems partially from the fact that I also grew up with RPGs, and I'm pretty sure that Dungeons and Dragons and other RPGs have had a huge influence, because you play a board game now, and Arkham Horror is a great example. You feel like you're there, and you get the tension of actually, am I going to uncover this crazy Cthulhu monster and just get destroyed? It creates a very evocative feeling, and I think immersion is a buzzword that I see a lot, where people really want to feel like they've got the virtual reality helmet on and in there. And I think that translates in Netrunner too. I think the way the cards are laid out, believe it or not, I mean, this is a small thing, but it ends up being a big thing. You feel like you have your rig right there if you're on the runner side, or you feel like you are watching a server get its firewall broken on the flip side, and that adds a lot to the game, just the way it's laid out card wise.
Yeah, I think a lot of very subtle credit goes to the graphic design team at Fantasy Flight Games. Michael Silsby was one of the primary uh, graphic designers during the core set. So when the look of the cards are being created, and if a lot of people don't really look at the framework of the card, they look at the art itself and they look at the rules text, and the rest of it, for the most part, just sort of fades into the background. And honestly, I think that's really important for good graphic design, is that it should put forward the parts that are most important without distracting you. But anybody who is watching right now and is a Netrunner player should reach over to their decks and pull out a couple of cards and take a look at the frames around them, the programs and the resources and the ice and the upgrades. They all have entirely different frames, and they even small subtle differences between the different factions. And it really sort of helps give you that sense that, oh, the hardware are like physical objects. The resources, if they're virtual or real, real world meat space, they are representative of things. But the programs are digital constructs, and all of the framework around it creates these ports and wires and like pseudo pixels that keep that allow you to keep that suspension of disbelief that like you were actually there, you are building a rig, you are monitoring a server, which is completely different if it was just like, oh, here's just a random black border or just the natural color of the paper. So I think that art and graphic design have a lot to do with supporting the visual elements that we as designers try to bring forward in our games.
Absolutely. On the Android itself is a universe that existed prior to Netrunner. It had a board game, and did the second board game come out before Netrunner did, or was that after?
If you're speaking of Infiltration, that came out before Netrunner.
Yes. Okay. Yeah, I was speaking of Infiltration. So you had that groundwork to start with, and some characters and all that. But were you given a Bible or a document, or where did you start from it, and how much were you and the other designers allowed to bring into the game in those early stages?
So Lucas Litzinger was the other game designer. He was the one who did the original core set and the first, I don't know, three lead designer for the first three cycles of data packs and the first three expansion boxes. And he and I combed through the Android board game a fair amount in those early days, trying to figure out which characters made sense, what corporations and factions would be represented. And he sort of like took everything that had been created by Kevin Wilson and Dan Levette Clark and put them together, and then sort of to shear away the parts that he needed to create the core set. And as I started doing more of the design work in those early days, we were still constantly referencing the original materials, walking over and talking to Dan about, how would this corporation do a thing? What would their net presence be? And sort of getting the ideas of some of the people who had really impacted the original game, as well as creating, new canon, things that were extrapolations and things that seemed to be natural outgrowths that they had created in the original.
When you design, how do you start with a mechanical idea for the most part, or do you start with okay, well, I've got Gabriel and he's doing this right now, and I would like him to go and infiltrate Jinteki or something like that, and I want him to have a means by which to do that feels like he's interacting with Jinteki. Do you start with that sort of concept in mind, or more mechanics first?
All the above. I think of them as bottom up and top down. For me, the idea of coming up with a theme and then finding a mechanic to fit it, I tend to think of as like one of the primary things that makes each cycle really interesting in the world as a whole, because it allows us to craft an identity for either a runner or a corporation, and then take the mechanics that with our take mechanics that are associated within that faction's color pie and then tweak it so that it's unique and meaningful to that particular card. But there are definitely times when it's like, okay, so criminal has none of this. They need some version of this to help them stay competitive. What would that look like from the criminal slice of the color pie? So criminal doesn't have any real recursion. That is pretty purposeful. Recursion falls into the realm of Shaper. And so Shaper's recursion is pretty straightforward. Find a card in your heap, take it back to your hand, or in some cases, put it directly into play. Or take everything in your heap and just turn it into your deck again. Congratulations, way to go. You get to start all over with stuff that you still have installed. But criminals' concept of how they do things is very different. They're supposed to be about preparation, and at the same time being able to be fast and loose. So cards that allow them to skip over ice, bypassing it or de-resing it once it has been res and they've managed to either defeat it or be defeated by it. Those sort of like tricks and shenanigans are their ways of dealing with things where other factions might try to destroy the piece of ice or might try to just break through it. So the idea of giving hard choices, because they're criminals, they're conmen and grifters, and the idea of a shell game. You've got 3 walnuts and a pea underneath, and you're moving those shells around, and you're looking at the mark. And you're like, okay, find the queen if it's 3-card Monty, and they tap one, and you show it, and it's not it. And the reason why, of course, is because there is no queen. The queen only existed on the table as long as they were showing it to you. The moment you couldn't see it, it was never there. It was still up their sleeve somewhere. And so the idea of false choices, I think, was really, really interesting to me. And that's where I came up with the idea of Steve Cambridge, who is the runner in Terminal Directive, where after a successful run on HQ, the first successful run, you choose 2 cards from your heap, and the corp chooses one, and that one is removed from the game, and the other one is added to your hand. And the fact that they never know which one is actually the right choice, to me, was very interesting, especially since in a lot of cases, it's a false choice to begin with. They're both bad choices for the corp.
Yeah, the bluffing and the little shell game mechanics are both simultaneously some of the most fun elements of Netrunner and the most frustrating. I gotta say,
it's very much like going against a Sicilian when death is on the line. It's that battle of wits where I clearly cannot choose the cup in front of you, and it's like I don't know which choice to make. Do I drink out of my cup? Do I drink out of your cup? Do I give you that account siphon, or do I give you an emergency shutdown? Like, you clearly chose those 2 cards because either of them are going to be things that you would like, but one of them is certainly the one that you want the most. And I'm trying to figure that out, or I'm just like, I can't possibly know, so I'm going to choose the one that scares me the most. Well, even doing that gives me, as the runner, information about where your strengths are and where your weaknesses are, and it allows me to adapt my play several turns later. And most corp players would not have even have been aware that by making choice A, they actually revealed a potential weakness of their deck.
nice. You mentioned Terminal Directive, so I'm gonna transition to that right here. There's not a ton known about it. Fantasy Flight's been a little quiet about it, which has both generated buzz. I think this is probably the most exciting Netrunner product I've seen in a couple years. I'm stoked for the whole legacy element. Can you talk about how it plays at all? Is there any information you can give at this point?
There's definitely some stuff that I can tell, some stuff that has been intimated in in the releases that we have given, things that I feel safe being able to say without giving anything away and spoiling, marketing's desire to have big reveals. But the way that it's generally set up is you take your box, you open your box, and you either have a box that you're sharing with someone, or you and I would each have our own boxes, because we're going to play through. I'll be corp on one time, and you'll be the runner, and then we'll play it again, reversing the roles. But as you play, as you build your deck, you're going to have accomplished certain things through regular gameplay that will unlock certain achievements, certain goals, certain tasks. And as you do that, you will get either possibly new cards, you will get things that will alter some stuff that you've had previously, possibly rules that will slightly change from one thing to another. And each time that you're going through this, you're going to be given choices. I can do A, or I can do B, or here is a thing, and I did this, and that puts me down this path, and that will give me a slightly different set of potential choices several games later than when you and I swap sides and you make a different gameplay that actually allows you to get something that I never even saw. So there's going to be some fair amount of replayability in regards to cards that and abilities, rules changes that you will never see on your side because of things that have happened. So once you've completed the entire campaign, you will not have seen everything. You will not have opened every set. You will not have gotten every possible thing. So playing it multiple times will still have some enjoyment, which was part of my design goal, because just because I played one time through as the corp against you playing as the runner doesn't mean that I shouldn't have the desire now to swap it around and try it as the runner, because I'm going to make different choices than you. I'm going to have a different kind of deck. I may have a different runner entirely, and that is going to encourage different choices. Different things will be achieved in the games, and that will open up new avenues of the campaign. The story itself, there's different branches, but once you reach the end, there's not a whole bunch of different endings. There's not like 9 or 10, like a choose your own adventure book. It is a distinct story that we are trying to tell. So the amount of end wrap-ups of the story are limited, but they are definitely different. You have more than one ending.
That's great. And it's great to hear that there's replayability involved. I realize that for people who are tuning in who might not know about this, I probably should have given a little more detail about it. I assume that you, or if you're watching this, you know what Android Netrunner is, so I'm not going to go into that. But Terminal Directive is coming out shortly. It's a big box legacy version of the game, which is compatible, I believe, with the tournament cards also that in the box, correct?
Yeah, there is I want to say 57 tournament legal cards in the box. So about what you would get out of a standard deluxe box. And then there is the legacy side, which anything that is revealed from the legacy side will not be legal for tournament play, but would be legal for legacy games. I have this vision in my head of being able to sit down with somebody who I did not play Terminal Directive with, but each of us have our Terminal Directive decks, with all of the additional illegal cards and abilities and information available to us, and just to see how it works between people who followed entirely different paths. So I think that would
to define legacy games for people who don't know what a legacy game is that you have it set up so one game impacts the next. If you play one game, I don't know specifically how Terminal Directive goes, but there's other legacy games out there. But there could be an instance in Terminal Directive where you've got your corporation, you've got a piece of ice, and the runners just totally destroyed it, and so it's just not available next game. Things like that occur in legacy games in general. And as the games progress, you build up a sense of a changing state, which is why I'm interested in talking about theme in regards to this, because it allows for you to really feel like you're playing through a story, not just through one game, but through a whole series of games as a campaign.
Yeah. One of the things that a number of Netrunner players have picked up on and have mentioned is one of the things that they really enjoy is that, as you had mentioned earlier, there is sort of an immersive side to playing standard Android Netrunner. You know, if you are Noise or Game, if you are Smoke or Silhouette, you have this identity that sort of like makes you travel down a certain path in your deck design because of the ability that it gives. And we were facing off against, Polana Foods, which is a Genteki identity. It's got a very different feeling than if you face off against a Builder of Nations Wayland deck. And so the way that you approach those decks would be very similar to the way that those actual people, those runners, would go about attacking different corporation servers. They're going to have different countermeasures against them. And so there is this idea that you're actually sort of telling a small story in the process of playing a standard game. And so part of what I was really trying to do when I was creating this narrative campaign was take that idea and then just take it up a few notches so that it was really clear to the players, like, oh, every game that I'm playing and the decisions that I'm making in it are telling part of this overall story. And every time I get a new piece of narrative from the Terminal Directive game, it is something that is an underpinning and a bridge to the next game that I'm going to play, or even to the next round, as I now have to deal with something that has come in from the idea that I am actually in a process of trying to, achieve a specific directive.
Now, is this a good spot for a new player to jump on? Can they just buy Terminal Directive and play within Terminal Directive, or do they need other Netrunner cards in order to get involved with this?
I would definitely say it is a fantastic place for newer players. I would say that a core set would be required. It has all of the tokens. It has additional cards to allow you to have some real choice. I think you could probably make a deck out of just the Terminal Directive cards, but without any of the tokens and without the base rule set. I wouldn't necessarily recommend it for a new player. I think that it's asking a lot of them to build a deck from scratch that is really intended to work with the core set. An experienced player might decide that they want to play it with all of the cards in their collection, but I think the purest, most enjoyable fashion of it is one core set and a Terminal Directive. Build your deck right in front of your opponent, and then just start playing.
That sounds fantastic, and that's honestly a pretty small buy-in for Netrunner players to get interested in this. I would think so. That makes me happy to hear. It also makes me happy to hear that is one of my questions is whether all the cards in Netrunner would be compatible to play within this campaign, and you answered that with a yes. So that's good.
Yes, yeah. There are no cards that would be disallowed. I do, as I said, I think that the best experience is just the core set. Because it keeps the focus on the campaign. When you start playing with other identities, or you're open up to your card pool to the full extent, I think that it takes some of the focus away from the story that you're supposed to be exploring. And that's a recommendation that's in the rule book, I believe. But once you've slapped down your money, it's yours, and you can do what you want with it.
Awesome. How much of I know there's a series of novellas and books out there, and recently we had that Worlds of Android, which came out, which is one of the most beautiful books I've ever seen. It's coffee table excitement right there, and something wonderful to peruse. If you want to show the whole world that you're in. What's up?
I was just going to say, Katrina Ostrander did a magnificent job of putting that together. That was her baby, her labor of love, and it turned out just gorgeous.
Yeah, it's phenomenal. Do you scroll back through the novellas and through that and try to incorporate elements of that into the game when you're looking at it?
Absolutely. That said, a significant number of things that you find in that book and that sort of make their way, in some cases backdrop, in some cases right up front for the novellas, comes actually from the game, or at least from the minds of the designers and development team, uh, as means of ensuring that those books and novellas are centered within the Android universe as we have conceived it and as we continue forward with it. So it's a little bit of back and forth, but I definitely draw a large amount of inspiration from the work of our authors.
Excellent. I think I'll wrap up with just a couple personal questions for you. Is
Sure.
what are your favorite games other than Netrunner to play?
Right now, I'm really digging on the Arkham Horror LCG. It's just it's a lot of that same sort of narrative drive game by way of a card game. Um, I I love it and I highly recommend it. Um, I am playing a lot of Mansions of Madness Second Edition as well. Again, narrative driven, very thematic, but being cooperative, much like the Arkham Horror LCG. It allows my wife and I, and a couple of friends, to sit down and not have to fight against each other, but actually work with each other towards a common goal. Um, just last night, I think we played 5 games in a row of Star Wars Destiny. My wife is like, "I love this game. I hate this game. This game is stupid. Oh my god, I love this game." It just
I
sort of depends
love
on
Star Wars
when you're in the
Destiny.
mood. It's a lot of fun. I it's sort of my guilty pleasure right now is pulling it out. The game plays so fast, so setting it out, and 15 minutes later, I've scratched that gaming itch, and then I can go on supposedly back to work or whatever it is that I'm supposed to be doing. So those are some of the games that are hitting my table right now. But I think where the most time is being spent is with CCFall.
Really? So CCFall, I looked at Gen Con and then I tried to pick it up real quick and it was gone before I even got there. So that never didn't happen. But I afterwards I heard it's a legacy game also for people who aren't aware. I believe it's about uh it's like it's ship colonizing and trade. Is that correct?
Yeah, each player represents a or rules a province, and you're exploring and trading and raiding different islands and neighboring provinces that are controlled by other players.
I what happened to me is I heard from so many people that it really didn't scratch the itch that they were looking for. That it really didn't, I guess, go far enough into something that was beyond a area control sort of aspect and uniqueness that they expected. Are you were pleased with it though?
Yeah, I think it may have to do with the fact that I didn't have much expectations for it to do much more than that, and I mean, like, I'm still playing it, so I have not gotten that far through it. But I'm actually really enjoying it. But then, I created Android mainframe, so I'm clearly into area control games. I like the fact that there is that constant hint of not knowing what's going to happen next. Like, here's a spot, I'm going to explore it. It may give me something awesome. It may give me something kind of okay, or it may actually like be detrimental to me, or it might actually advantage a opponent more than myself. But yeah, that finding the different islands, taking control of things, learning how to trade, when to raid, um, and the ability to name new islands and advisors and your ships and stuff like that, I think is um, I don't know if I would say novel, because while it is pretty pretty unique to the gaming world at this particular point, novel sort of seems almost to slight it. Like, if it wasn't new, it wouldn't be fun and interesting. But if you play MMOs, particularly anything that involves like having ships, whether they're starships or sailing ships, and you're naming your vessels and you're naming the worlds you conquer, the lands that you discover, there's a fair amount of joy in world building. And so anyone who likes world building, particularly from like a role-playing perspective, I think that this game might have a very particular attraction to them, because you are writing the future of the world as you play through it. And I think that is got a little bit of a compelling element all on its own, above and beyond the gameplay.
That sounds like something that definitely appeals to me. So that's probably why we had this chat. So thank you for joining me, Damon. Again, this is Damon Stone, for Android Netrunner designer and mainframe designer, which I love mainframe, and we play that very often, by the way. I'm Jon Del Arroz, author of Star Wars Rescue Run. Join me next time. We'll be talking to James Paulos, who just came out with a book, The Art of Being Free, which will be fun. Thanks for joining us.
Bye.